Hello and welcome to another edition of the Low-Code Cafe number 80. This is February 16th, 2022. And we're going to continue today on our main topic from last week about JavaScript tools and techniques. And so we'll have a part 2 on this today. We'll also get into some know-how, how to do sitemaps for entity details and some other things. So just briefly about this webinar. This Low-Code Cafe happens every week. It's a community webinar. It tends to be technical in nature. And we invite you, if you have something that you think would be relevant to our community, to be a guest speaker. And I believe we will have a guest speaker next week. So we're looking forward to that. All these editions are recorded on our YouTube channel, so you can subscribe at youtube.com/plantanapp. And we have a pretty straightforward agenda today. We're going to do a little bit out of our normal order. Radu is going to start right away with hands-on low-code development. And then I'll follow up after a bit with some roadmap updates and from the trenches of support. So with that, Radu, would you like to jump in and get us started?
Hey, hello. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, sure. I will most likely need Dale to stop the share screen, and I will join with mine. Thank you very much. All right, cool. So is my screen visible? I hope so. Okay,
yep.
So
yep. Sorry, that looks great.
No worries. Okay, not the usual setup as I said today. Cool. So continuing on the discussion that we had last time about the JavaScript function, I was thinking for today to handle a different subject and include the JavaScript functions also. I would like to go into showing you how to do a multi-step submission of multiple forms actually. So basically we're gonna have a step-by-step a multiple step. We'll have 3 steps. Submission for 3 forms that will submit at the same time, and we'll interact with the JavaScript functions to create a really nice look and feel about the process that we are planning to. So to do that, I have already created a page. I will call it a multi-step page, multi-step submission. On this page right now, I have already a tab component, right? A tab component. So that this tab component will let me create my multi-step, and I have 3 forms: step 1, step 2, and step 3. My mistake here, which are gonna be our three main steps, right? So initially, what we'll need to do for this, we'll need to navigate to the tab component, right? And we'll need to define our 3 steps. Okay, so we can add a new tab, and let's say basic details, yeah. Okay, let's add a new one, which we'll call I don't know. Let's say communication preferences. Sorry, like this. And let's also have a third one, final, submit. So now we have those 3 tabs. Let's go. Let's click save for the moment being, or I don't know. Maybe let's go under the settings and check the show empty tabs, and maybe it makes sense to have full white tabs for this one. And let's refresh really quickly, right? So now we have three tabs, 3 simple tabs where we have the basic details, communication preferences, and the submit one. So I hope it's visible, but I can navigate to those 3 freely for the moment. What we'll need to do next, it will be to add the existing form components from the page, step 1, step 2, and step 3. Basically to add them in each individual tab. So we have 3 empty forms right now on the page, and we'll specify exactly which of the forms we want to be displaying in which of the tabs. So we need to add the components first on the page and then specify in the tab component where we want each individual step to be. So let's do that. The basic details are going to get a step 1. Communication preferences is going to get the form with step 2. And the submit one will get the one with step 3. So let's click save. Even if I refresh right now, maybe not a lot of things happen because the forms are empty. But if we go right now and start configuring step 1, for example, what would you like? Let's say we have a name. Let's say a textbook, right? So we want to add a textbook for the name, and also add one for the email, right? And maybe another one for the phone. Let's keep those 3. We'll like to make all of those 3 required. So I'm just going to navigate under validation and mark the required fields. Obviously, for the email, I would like to do the email validation, and make it required. And for the phone, we are going to do the same validation and required. Okay. Let's click save. And also in the end, we'll need to add a button, right? So the button, which will be, let's say, let's call it next step at the moment. And we'll make it validation, the default. Let's make it a primary button, and let's align it to the right. And let's go to the layout, and maybe it makes sense to make the fields a little bit smaller, not too small, but just to center the page. And maybe we can do the same with the button, like this. So this looks good. Let me click save, and let's see what we achieved at this moment. And it's not exactly what I had in mind. Let me change a little bit the look and feel. Under settings, I would like to have the label at the top. We can keep the Bootstrap theme for the moment. Right, so I have the name and email and phone. So what I would like to happen right now, whenever I click on the next step, I would like my my form to get validated at the same time, but also I would like to move to the communication preferences tab, right? So even if I will fill the data, I want the data to be validated, but at this moment I'm not planning on submitting any data to the server to do data, actually do something with this information, right? So what I would like to do when I click the next step, I would like to go to the communication preferences tab, right? So to do that, I'm going to go back to my step 1, and I will see that I actually have a JavaScript, well, an action which is actually execute the JavaScript, which is called change tab, and in this case, let's stop the execution, right? So to do that, we select the tab component from the page, and we specify that we want to go under the communication preferences. And this checkbox here, we'll tackle a little bit about it in a second. So let's do it like this. And let's click save, right? So right now, if I fill in the form and I click next step, I'm gonna automatically move to the communication preferences tab, right? But keep in mind, I'm not using yet this data. I would like to use the data in this form and in the communication preferences form whenever we reach the submit step, right? So let's go really quickly and configure the step number 2. The form number 2, and we'll just do maybe a quick this one can be a down the checkboxes, and let's say contact me like this, and let's go with email, phone, SMS, and mail. Let's have the 3 for the moment being, right? So contact me, let's say bye. That makes a little bit more sense. Also, let's go and say, yes, we want this to also be required. So they cannot skip this step if they plan of going forward. But the difference is here that we have we are in the middle right? That we are in a step which is not the first and not the last. In this case, we are just 3, but the thing is that to give, if you want at this moment, you can give the possibility for the user to have a next and previous button. Maybe he wants to modify something, right? So to achieve this, what you can do, you can add 2 buttons really quickly. Let's add one and say, then duplicate it really quickly. So one would be last, whether, you know,
Back.
back, yeah, back. And then this one can say next step as well. Let's have the next one to be left and info this should do the trick. But the next step also we want to be primary and on the right. Let's put the layout the same as in the other form. So like this, and we can have the back button until here and the next button here, right? Okay, so the back button, what it should do? Well, the back button, the trick is here that the back button should not cause the validation, right? So because me as an end user, I'm moving back in the process. That means that the field that I have to fill in right now, which is the contact me by, this should not be validated for requirements. So to eliminate this validation, I will uncheck the cause validation for this button, and also add the action change tab and stop execution. And for this one, again, the same tab, and let's go back to basic details. For the next step, same configuration. Well, let's say similar configuration, but I just want to move to the submit state. All right, and now let's click save and let's see what we have until now. And again, I forgot to change the layout, so give me a second. I like the things to look also good, so let's go and change the label align to top. So now we have it like this, right? So you have the basic details, you click next step. Well, I cannot click next step. Click next step, and if I want to go again, this is required, but if I want to move back, this is not required, right? So the data it's still here. So if I choose next step, I will go to the submit button. So let's say let's go to the last step, and for here what we can do, we can have only for this specific example, I'm just going to have a button. If you want to add extra fields, submit me. Let's do it like this. Let's have this button to be large, primary, and centered, right? And maybe just for not a button, sorry, but maybe we can also have text, and let's say you reached the last step. Please submit your data. All right.
And do we need a back button on this one?
We'll add it for sure, and we need the back button. Oh well, we can use this one. You're right. And let's create the back button, right? Back button, normal left or right, and do the change. Tab stop execution. Choose the tab. Go to communication. Do not forget to change back the label at the top. Click save. Let's check the layout a little bit. So we have this like this. We want the change button to be bigger and centered, and oh wait, let me rearrange this. So static text, submit me back. Cool. Let's give it a look. Right, so you list the last step. Please submit your data. You have the back button, but yeah. So we have the back button and the last button. The thing is that, as you can see, even the trick is really simple here. So there are two main things that I would like to focus right now. The first of all, I still can freely move to tabs which is not great because I can click the submit button whenever I want, and it's not exactly what I really need in this situation. And also, when I click the submit button, I'm interested in grabbing information also from the previous forms, right? So let's start with the easy one. So how do I grab information from different forms that are on the same page? The fact that right now they're also in different tabs, that's a bonus, but in reality there are just 3 different forms on the same page, right? So we'll navigate to the last one, and not and we'll click on the submit me button, and you'll see here we have something called connected forms, right? So those connected forms, what it's gonna give us, it gives us the opportunity to also submit, to also grab basically the data. Let's say step 1 and step 2, right? So the idea is that whenever I click the submit me button on step number 3, I also grab the data from step 1 and step 2, and you can see that the data, it's available like this. It's form name and the field ID from the previous forms, right? So in the end, and let's go with a show message. Is it like the sorry, display message? Display a display message, which can actually help so achieve this, right? So we have this data is available, so you can create but maybe you want to do a complex registration form, or you want to split a very, very big form in smaller ones. So what we can do, please, Dale.
Oh, no, you're good.
Oh, okay.
Sorry for making noises. We're going to have a question here in a minute, but I'm going to let you get through what you've got. Let me
link those forms, and we can take the question. So we have what we have. We have the name, and let's see. We have the I think we have step 1, step right. So we have the name, the email, the phone, and contact me by, I think.
Yep.
It was called, right? So I have this final answer. Let me click save. Right, let me refresh. And let's start. Let's be good guys and complete the form as intended. Right, so email, phone, next step, and submit me. Right, so I just grabbed data from my previous forms, which is really great because the thing is, the good part is that data got validated by each individual form, but got submitted by the last one, right?
Right. So it's all or nothing, but you don't get partial submissions from like the basic or communication. It only happens on submit.
The thing is, there's an interesting thing. So you can change tabs without validation, and if you click at the end of the submit button, the validation will trigger. It just depends. So let me show you. I think I can show you. Let me go back to step number 2. Let's say. And let me deactivate the cause validation on step number 2. So what I'm going to try to do right now, what I'm going to do is basically, let me refresh. So let me fill in the first step, click next, right? But remember, this one is required, but I will not cause the value. I'm not going to check for this when clicking next step. So what's going to happen when I click submit me, you're going to see the tab got red, because something here is not filled in, right? So I cannot submit the form. I cannot do this full submission because something in one of my multi-step tabs is not required, right? So that's the trick, is that you can have a multi-step form submission in, and you do not need to lock the tabs by doing this, right? I think there was also an option to actually change the tab directly to the one that has the first issue encountered, right? So when I click submit, okay, something's wrong here, and so on. So I need to fill this on, click next step again, and do the submit me, and then I get the submission done. We can respond to the question.
Okay, so it's can a value from tab 1 form be displayed on the tab 2 form before submit?
Can a value from tab 1 be displayed on tab 2 form before submit? For example, display the name before contact me options. Yes, that can be achieved. I think we have the time to I can show you how. So let's go to step 2 really quickly. Let me add a field of a text box, and let's say name. What I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna enable this step, this field, right? So I'm just gonna have it like this. All right. And what I'm gonna do right now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go into the initial value, say query string name, right? So I'm gonna do this initial value here, and let me show you why. Because what I'm gonna do is basically whenever I'm gonna navigate to, I'm gonna navigate to step 1. I'm gonna enter the step 1 changes settings, and I will go to the next button. And before changing the tab, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use an initialize form and continue execution before changing the tab. Why I'm doing this? Because I would like that step 2 to receive the query string parameter, right? So I'm gonna say name equals name. So what I'm actually doing before changing the tab, I'm passing the name to the next form. So I'm basically I'm passing the name to the next form. So how this goes is basically I have this. So we have the name here. So I'm just gonna fill in really quickly this automatically. I'm gonna click next step, and now the name was passed to the next step.
Very nice.
So hopefully this answers the question. Now the last thing that I would like to show you is what I would like to do. I want to do a strict tab change, basically. So basically you start from basic details, but you cannot navigate to communication and preferences until you fill in like the first step and so on. So to achieve that, what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna use the query string because people can mess up with that, but I'm gonna use a session token. So to achieve that, let's go under the configuration and let me show you a little bit how this works. So let's go navigate under tokens and search for session, right? So we have the set session one. So the idea, it will be something like this. What I can do, I can say, well, this, I will say, I will set a variable called step, and I'm gonna say you are gonna have value 1, right? Maybe need to single quote. So the thing would be, my bad. Okay. So I'm setting step 1, step 2, and step 3. So why I want to do this? I can run it. It doesn't have a response. It sets the variable. The idea that you can also grab the variable with the other token. But let's go to the multi-step session page for the moment, and let's go to step 1 for the moment. And let's say whenever we click the, let's do an create and create up this token. We can use this action really here before doing the initialization of the form. We can say you can put whatever you want in the name in this particular situation. So let's say none. And this will basically execute the token. So what we're doing, we're setting a session variable in the user experience. We'll say, well, you need to enable step 2, and we are basically navigating to step. So we are on step 1 and navigating to step 2. We are setting those variables, and let's move to step 2 as well. So when clicking next, we are moving to step 2. Now in this, I'm in the wrong one. Sorry. Also, at the same time, here we have back and next, right? So in the back one, we actually gonna have create update tokens, move it above, And here we're going to have again none. And when clicking back, we are moving to step 1. And maybe I should export this really quickly. And for the next step, when moving to the next step, I'm going to re-import this and say we are going to move to step number 3.
So the session variable step says what step is enabled, we're keeping track of where you're supposed to be in the process.
Exactly. And the last one that we need to set up, which will be really quickly step 3. And it's the back button, and the back button will navigate. Let me re-import this action really quickly, move it above what we already have, and say if you navigate to this, you're going to go to step 2. Why I'm doing this? Well, let me refresh really quickly. So now I will have this this session variable is not visible, so the only way to grab it right now is through the session token. The thing is that why I'm doing this is because I can all the 3 tabs that I have right now, those 3 have something called show conditionally or enable conditionally, right? So the idea is that we can set up conditions when a tab is shown or enabled. And the good part is that we have an option to retrigger the we can retrigger the state of the tab. So if you remember, there was a checkbox there saying reevaluate tabs. So at that point, what we can do is we can go and at this moment we can go here and say, let's take the session step. I think the session it's only gonna work inside the component itself.
Yep.
So step equals, so the first time you come in, the session step may be empty. So if it's empty or the step is 1, it's equal to 1, then we want this this to be enabled. And the rest will be basic. So we have the show enable conditional. This is gonna be when step 2, and this is gonna be when the enablement is step 3. Right, so let's save. And let's refresh the page. So you can see we are on the basic details tab, which is right now, which has had the value. I cannot navigate on the next tab, right? So I can fill the data and I can click next step. And now you can see that I'm on the second step, and I can also go back, and also I can continue on having the email and the phone. And I can click next step and so on, right? So, but you'll see that right now what's happening, it's there's a the tab component, it's in a weird error because it doesn't know exactly what to do, because the condition says that the tab should be disabled, but at the same time I can, some of them are navigated and some are. What's actually happening is that I'm not telling the tab component to actually say, hey, something changed when I click the next button, please try to re-evaluate the tab conditions, right? So the thing it will be that if I go, for example, in step 1, what I can do is I will say change tab. I will say evaluate state. So this option will actually will reevaluate all the conditions of all the tabs, right? So I'm gonna need to do this in step 1, in step 2. And step 2, and also step, well, yeah, same step.
Everywhere where you're changing tabs.
Exactly. So you could, so don't get me wrong, you don't need to do this every time, right? The thing is, you don't need to do this every time. The trick here is that you're just creating a better user experience. You can also leave them available to navigate through tabs as they want, because you saw that the idea is that the forms will not submit if not all the forms are valid. But if you want to create like a step-by-step experience, I would recommend doing it like this, with setting the session step and reevaluating everything and so on.
It looks to me like you would be able to, for example, to let them have all of the previous tabs, but not the future tabs, if that's the experience you wanted to provide.
We can do,
Yeah, well, no, don't feel like you have to change. I'm just saying with
it's
those
really
conditions,
simple.
Yeah.
No, the idea is that it's really, really simple to do that, because, you know, tab 1, it's enabled tab 1, it's enabled all the time, right? At that point. The idea is really simple. You just need to specify exactly which are the tabs, or even easier than this. You just say if the tab is bigger than 1, this is enabled, right? And the trick is that you just change the equals to a bigger sign, your equals, sorry. So you just you basically achieve this just by doing this. You know, it's not, you don't need to be on the third tab. You basically any tab that equals or bigger. So all the tabs before this one are still enabled, so you can navigate back there. So something like this. Let's see. I think the variable it's a little bit messed up. And I think I I did a small mistake in the conditions. Let's leave them as equals for the moment.
Is the condition, is it a double pipe or a single pipe?
Double pipe. Here you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's double pipe.
Okay.
No, double pipe. So let's see. Fill this in, but why can I navigate? A second. All right, so this is enabled. I can navigate to the next step. Why? What's happening? Where's my? Excuse me. Let me see. Give me a second, please. So evaluate tab states, and the response is enabled, is shown, is enabled, shown. So it's not enabled. Okay, wait. We're doing this.
Well, I didn't mean to send you down a rabbit hole. It's possible. I said.
Yeah, let me try something really quickly. Set session. I think the session is not set to be 1 at the moment, which is let me minimize it for a second.
Can we use the default?
And I just want it keep it as 1 for the moment. Let me see if this enables the logic. The thing is, I think that system thinks that we should be on step 2, not step 1, and there's some other logic that we may need to. I think it thinks that we are on step 1, this step right here, but we are not. Okay, so it's moving. It's a weird setup. Please.
Does one have to be a quoted string, or can it be just?
It can be a number. We are automatically trying to cast the values. So if you have a condition which is an equivalent with a number, we basically take the variable. We take the arbitrary strings that you write there, and we check: is this a number? If yes, we are gonna have it as a number. Is this a boolean? True or false? 1, 0. Is this a date?
Yep.
And
so
in the end, if anything is not, if you want to specify exactly that we're matching a string, then you should use the double quotes. If you want to have a character, only one character, you should specify with single quotes. So the evaluation is basically we are trying to cast the value to something known. If not, we are going to think it's a string. All right. What? I don't know. I think I'm lost on this one, but let me give it another try. So the session step, let me try to do a trick really quickly, just to say if I can figure it out in a minute. I will try to see Can you hear me? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
you're good.
All right. So let's see if I can do static text really quickly with debug and say this is the session step. I'm just curious exactly which step are we in and navigating through the.
Sure, trying to figure out, narrow down where we're going sideways.
So it thinks we are in step 2. So if I click next step, we are actually in step 2, but we are not able to navigate. But if I run this one and do the refresh really quickly, are we in step 1 now?
Still loading.
Yep. Let's give it a minute. No, we are stuck somehow in step number 2. So let me do. I have an idea. Let me do this. Whenever you land on the page, you will have step 1 set up. So we get a reset. Each time you access the page, you restart everything from the start.
Makes sense.
Less than. I think Mark is correct in the question. Let me do in the events into the on page load. Let me see if I still have the no. Add create tokens. Let's say
None.
session of step equals 1, and on the wrong side, but here we go. So now we should, whenever we land on the page, we should reset the first page. I think I'm stuck somehow into not being able to change back to. So this reset may actually be part of the what it needs to happen. So now we are on the 1, and if we click next, I think I'm missing something, but I'm just not seeing it. I can try. Let me try something else. Fresh tab pro. Okay, I can try something else. It's just gonna take a minute. It's 1, 2. Come on, help me here. I will try to do something else. Change tab. I will do a JavaScript and continue execution and trigger the change manually with my module ID, which it should be 398, I think. Let me be sure. But second, let me confirm the module ID is the one that I'm looking for. Oh, it's not specified, so I need to most likely do an inspect really quickly and figure it out. 398, yeah, that's fine. Let me refresh the page really quickly and click next. Oh, okay, fill it in. Click next. I'm a little bit lost. So let's do something like this. Let me come back next week with an explanation of what exactly happened here, and we can move to the next panel.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. I know you had some unusual circumstances that you had to work through today, and I am sure you will figure it out. Let me share my screen. Very good. All right. All right, Radu, thanks for joining. We will catch you next time. So moving on to product roadmap updates, and just checking my list of who got to be here today. All right. So this last, let's see, Tuesday, I think the email went out, but we had our release date late in the day on Monday that version 1.19 went out, and so we encourage you to download and use that. And also that with that you got the it has the experimental version of Bootstrap 5, and for those of you who are in a position to be able to test that, we appreciate any feedback that you can give us. Our plan again is that we will finalize and stabilize. It'll move out of experimental as we move into version 120, but it is available, and encourage you to give that a try. And also we did launch the feature request section on Campfire. So that's campfire.plantanapp.com. And we have several several feature requests that have been entered already. So whether you want to add one or vote for one, we encourage you to come take a look at that. So with that, I'm going to move on to the From the Trenches segment. This is what we find, the kinds of things we find in the support channel week by week. And so we bring them to you, some of these things that we think that you should be aware of. So as part of our normal process on Mondays now, we are releasing hotfixes. So if you're still on version 118, there were 3 hotfixes that were added, and if you're happening to be waiting for any of these, you're welcome to apply these hotfixes. So the first one was cosmetic. When in our search, in our search administration page, we numbered things 1, 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, or something like that. So we've corrected that cosmetic thing. The affiliate ID, the user affiliate ID token, was not always evaluating correctly, and that has been corrected. And that reminds me that I need to post that answer. I think maybe the poster of that is on this webinar today, but I would need to make sure that I always like to go back and let people know that we're waiting on a feature that we finally released a fix for it. So that's the user affiliate ID token. And the last one is that in the Google Places feature, we had need internally, and we've added the ability to add component restrictions. So that you see it on the screen here, you can specify that the country codes that are relevant to that particular search, you can add up to 5 country codes, and it passes it into Google so that the Places feature is more accurate. So those are 3 hotfixes that came out, and I'll continue to mention hotfixes as they are released, but those are out for 1.18. And last week, I promised to talk some about sitemaps for entity details. We had a user, Ben is reminding me that I'm saying the wrong thing. It's actually in the feature request is in community.plantanapp.com. So that's community portal, community.plantanapp.com. And I said the wrong one. I said Campfire. So that's good. Thank you for keeping me on track. And Matthew acknowledges it was you. So now I don't have to update that case. I will anyway, just for people who find it later. So yeah, sitemap for entity details. This was a question that we got on support recently, and let me see if I can illustrate what the problem is. I've actually implemented this solution on the Campfire website. So for those of you that are participating there, you'll be able to see this directly. But first, the problem. When you have a list of things, when you've created an entity page for contributions, and so in this case, that's our entity contributions, and so they all have names, and when you click into them, it goes to a detail page, and so this is the contribution ID for number 20. So there's a very specific URL that opens up the detail page, and when a search engine like Google crawls your site, they may not see this because they don't, their crawler doesn't have the ability to, or doesn't always click the buttons. So if you're finding, or click in this case the link. So if you're finding that your pages aren't being indexed, this is one way to create a sitemap that you can then submit to the search engine and get them to crawl it. Now, this one, I believe it's oriented towards Google that I'm going to show, but you could, it's really up to the specification of however a sitemap file is supposed to be built. And so let's see what we can do with that. So I'm going to do this by way of an API. Before the webinar, today I was trying to set this up as a workflow, and that's probably a good way to do it, and maybe I'll come back with that as a part 2, but I definitely wanted to get this solution out and available for you. So I've created a API called sitemap for contributions, and so this is going to give us an XML that we can use. And for example, and it's already set up and running. And so if I click the run feature and say get response, we're going to get this, just kind of giving you an overview. This thing returns a bunch of XML. And if I paste that XML into a beautifier so we can see what's going on, it shows that it's got all of the XML characteristics, and it's providing a list of URLs. Each URL, so we've got contribution ID 1, 2, 3, and then the last date that changed. So this is the format that the search engines are expecting from a sitemap. So how did that work? How did we get it to happen? It's a short. There's 5 or 6 steps, and I've kind of done it in a couple of different ways so that we can see. But it doesn't take. Well, let's walk through all these. So we're going to provide an XML sitemap, and I'm building this as a get. You may need to make it as a post. I saw a note that maybe it might have to be 2 different ways, a get and a post. So you'll have to take a look at that. But this is enabled. We don't need it in debug mode. I'm setting it up in cache so that with the longest cache value possible, so that once this runs, it only runs once every however long that is. I don't know. Is that a day? I don't know. But the answer is cached so that if you have a really long process, it doesn't. If outside processes request your sitemap, it's not dragging down your system. It's just going to give the answer once in that period. So we have no input parameters. All we're going to do is, it's the same thing every time. So let's walk through the steps. The first one is that we're going to use create update tokens to create something called nodes. And this is where we're going to place all of the XML nodes that need to be part of this output. And so it's just basically creating an empty variable. The next step is that we're going to create a list from SQL. We're going to get the list of information that is going to drive, and each entry in each row that's returned by the SQL is going to get turned into a node that's going to be added to the XML. So we've worked forward to come up with a SQL select that returns we're pulling information from the app contribution page. I have no where clause, so it's going to get all the contributions. And the ID that comes back from that is going to get added to the rest of the URL. And in this case, we're just hard coding the URL. But if you remember here, we see it, and I'm going to dig into one of these. It comes directly from here. Everything from this point back is the URL that we want to include, and then we're going to add the 21 or whatever the ID is. So that's where this part of it comes from, and then we cast the ID as a varchar so that we can create it together in an output field called URL. So we're going to get URL as one thing, and then we're going to have a formatted date in year, month, day format as the created date is going to be the date. And maybe that could be the updated date if we wanted to, that probably would be a better answer here, but I did it as created date just to illustrate. And so that's all what's going to be returned from SQL. And it's going to be put in a list called links so that we can walk through the rows in links and do something with it. So next step is that we execute actions for each list entry. We're iterating through links, and the action list, this action gets executed once for every row that's in that table. So in that list of information, so there's one row for every URL. So we're updating the nodes, which we created earlier, to equal to be the same thing as it was before. So we're appending to nodes, as that's the result of this thing. And we're appending this XML. And let me see if I can copy it out here. It doesn't display really, really nicely here, but if we format it nicely so we can look at it, it's adding the a loc XML tags. So a loc tag, and then we put the URL, the last mod, and we put the date. Change frequency is just hard-coded to be daily. Priority is 0.5. You'll have to figure out the values that make sense to pass to for your sitemaps. But that's what's happening. So each time through each row, nodes gets longer and longer. And so then we got to do something with it. So the one I've already demonstrated to you is the raw response. I'm going to come back to save file to disk. But the raw response, what we have here is that some prefix XML that's standard every time with this particular application. And then we pass in our nodes, and then we close out the URL set tag so that it's nicely formed XML. We send it back with a 200 OK, and we also send it back with a content type in case the responding, the querying, the mechanisms that is querying the API. This is probably a header that they want to be able to see. What is this? It's XML. So when we saved it and tested it, and we clicked get response, we got the XML out of it, and we showed that it comes back in nicely formatted XML. So if the thing that you're trying to, if the sitemap mechanism, the spider that you're trying to feed, search engine you're trying to feed, is wants to have an API, then this response, this XML response, is what it will be expecting, and you'll be able to use that. So the alternate thing that I did, and this is kind of an addition, I'm using a save file to disk. And so I'm saving that same, I'm using a text content, I'm building the same kind of content using the same prefix and suffix here to do the XML, but I'm putting it in my temp folder and calling it testmap.xml. It doesn't matter what I called it in this case, but this is going to generate a URL that could be submitted to a search engine as well. So now it looks just like a sitemap that might be expecting. You're just passing a URL. So what do we get out of that? When this runs, if we I'm going to take a look at my file management here, and that was going in the temp folder. I'm going to sort by date modified. We have a test map XML, and if I get the URL of that and copy it, I can open it up in a new tab and paste it. And that same XML that we were providing a minute ago as a response to the API now also exists as a file on campfireplantainapp.com. And so you could submit this URL to a search engine. And just to kind of demonstrate that, I found without any, I'm not endorsing the site, I just found it. I found an XML sitemap validator, and you paste your URL into it, and it comes back with a nice green, no issues detected. So I'm assuming that it actually works. I haven't submitted it, but we use this internally, and this API that we're demonstrating here came from, when you go on to dnnsharp.com, searching Google, and we're getting a lot of answers to, but I'm using Google to search just our site. We have submitted this sitemap to Google. And so, this might be confusing that I'm searching for sitemap. This could be anything. Search for debugging, but we'll see that the various cases that and all of our content that we've submitted to Google is being returned, and so that's a way of getting your information into Google. So a couple of different ways to do for sitemap. I have this again this is done in Campfire. So for anybody who's participating in Campfire, you can take a look at it directly, and you could export this API and modify it to suit your needs. But it's called sitemap for contributions, or you can just, if you're watching the video, you can recreate it based on your needs. Let's see, with that, that's the From the Trenches segment today. I see no questions. We do have a time for if anybody has any questions, but I will take this opportunity to ask. I see Bogdan has been able to join us now, and so if he has any questions or comments that he would like to add, and I'm going to take a minute and put our links onto the chat. The links that you see here are going to include an API reference, what we would call early documentation. This is what we're using internally for the, and you saw Radu flash it up on his screen with all of the API calls that are possible, what they do, how to format them. And so this, you're welcome to take a look at it. It's a Google sheet, and it's not formatted as nicely as what will end up in our documentation, but we don't want to withhold that. So it's available for you to look at. We also have links to provide feedback for this webinar, or you can register in advance for Low-Code Campfire, which is just a great conversation that I see week by week. People get help directly from their peers, so that's a great one, and also our community portal. So thank you for that. Bogdan, any last words?
No, it was very, very useful. I could say that we use the sitemaps for a lot more. Even on the Plantanet website for the blog, we have a similar thing. For the landing pages, we have a similar thing. Yes, because this idea of giving the sitemaps to Google is probably much faster and easier than letting Google crawl the website to discover them. So I think it's a very handy feature. And of course, it's something that we are looking at adding built-in in the product at some point in the future, so you don't have to go through all these loops. But as always, with low-code, there's always a way to do things until we manage to add them as a feature. So thanks, Dale, for sharing that. And thanks, Radu, for demoing the APIs. We'll catch up with you next week to give us the solution as well for the last bit. And then everyone else, thanks for being here, and we'll be seeing each other again next week, same day, same time.